Welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. It's happy hour. Get ready to be the happiest you've been all week because Jesse Waters is here. He has a brand new book out. Get it together. It is the story of his life and how he went from ramblin' hobo to cable news network superstar in just 2 short years. Jesse, welcome to Kennedy Saves the World.
Thank you very much. It's actually not what the book's about. That was my first book, How I Saved the World, which I did not steal from you.
People ask me that all the time. They're like, you stole your podcast name from Jesse. I'm like, I didn't.
I actually think
And it was
I
your
came
wife
up.
who realized that. She was.
My wife came up with the name of the book, but by the time the book was released, you had already had this title as your podcast. So it did look like I stole it.
No, it looked like I stole it from you because your book had way more publicity. So people are like, oh,
Neither of us stole
just
it.
like a woman to steal everything from a man.
We're both innocent.
Yes, that's right. There's no culpability here. But this is a lovely mocktail.
Yes.
I actually found this recipe online, and guess what this mocktail is called?
What?
The Liberal.
The Liberal. I'll have two.
So I went online looking for the most liberal cocktail.
Okay.
And then the Liberal came up, and I'm like, this is amazing.
What is it?
If you were making this with actual alcohol, it would be rye whiskey, sweet vermouth, Amaro, and a little bit of orange bitters.
Mm-hmm.
I can only admit to the orange bitters being in there. Everything else is...
I like how you say it's a mocktail.
Well, sure, Jesse.
With the air quotes.
Yes. There we go. There's
Thank
the
you.
Liberal. Ooh. And I broke my coupe, so I have to settle for a French Bulldog highball.
Well, cheers, Kennedy. Thank you so much
Cheers.
for having me on to promote Get It Together, which you can buy on Amazon right now. I love you,
Cheers,
Kennedy.
Jesse. I love you, Jesse Waters.
Cheers.
That's very liberal.
It's delicious.
Yes. Well-balanced drink, I have to
never
say.
thought I'd say that about a liberal. That goes down nicely.
What do you think is going to happen in the fall?
I was told never to make predictions again. Britt Hume sat me down.
Okay, frankly, Britt Hume can sit in the corner because you made one of the greatest predictions ever on the 5.
What?
Yes, the year before the New Year's predictions, and your prediction came true.
I don't even know what I predicted, but yeah, I'm great.
That the Eagles were going to beat the Patriots in the Super Bowl.
I did. I had a nice year that year, but then I predicted the red wave, and Hume told me to cool it. So
I think
I'm
he's
not
jealous.
Going to make any predictions.
So do you think having a mom who's a therapist, did that sort of influence you, and did that help you become a more empathetic person?
It did. Having liberal parents made me more caring. I listen more. Maybe I'm not as mean. Maybe I'm more tolerant towards liberals.
Yeah.
And maybe I suffer fools better than some people.
You're such a tolerant person.
I am. Usually, a lot of people jump down your throat on cable, but I listen for 2 hours, 3 hours sometimes. Do these people spill their guts?
Is that all they needed? Like, did they just need someone to talk to?
It was therapeutic.
I was going to say, did they need an extended therapy session?
And a lot of this is narcissism, and they want to have attention showered upon them. You don't know anything about that.
No, absolutely not.
And it's helpful, but at the end of the day, you just don't want a social revolution. You just want people maybe to go to therapy instead.
I would like people to go to therapy. I think it would be great. I don't think there are so many problems we have, especially in New York. Like when I look around, there's a guy right now. I take the subway to and from work just about every day. And there's a guy right now in a wheelchair shooting himself up with heroin in the turnstile that leads from the subway to the Fox hallway.
How does Jimmy Fallon do that and then get to work on time?
See, I think the wheelchair isn't because he can't walk. I think it's because he's lazy.
He's taking advantage. You're right, but it's not always about therapy or pharmaceutical drugs. A lot of people just need maybe to go on a hike, read a book, drink some water.
Maybe some psychedelics.
We interviewed a guy that's a tote smoker.
Yeah, and that I think is very curious because you were even surprised by
he was the most well-adjusted person of the 24 people we interviewed.
Yeah,
the man who has seen God every time he smokes this.
And how is Mike Tyson? Because Mike Tyson loves the tote.
It's right. It changes lives.
He said that absolutely was an intersection in his life, and the part of him that he felt most guilty about, the part of him that held the most regret, that part almost died away and he was reborn. And now he is a religious person. And hopefully he is going to annihilate Jake Paul.
I think he's going to win.
Yeah.
And he's going to get inside, get to the body. And I don't think Jake Paul's been in the ring with anybody like that. But the toad does take you to a place that is far beyond anybody's conception of reality, but it's also dangerous if you're not prepared for it. This gentleman said that you need about a week to do yoga, do transcendental meditation, just to prepare your psyche to enter into this netherworld, so to speak. And it can have long-lasting psychiatric effects. Someone just had a psychic break when they went in there casually.
Oh, I don't think it's something that should be entered into casually.
No, and now, they've
It's
lost
like
all their
entering
money.
into parenthood casually.
Right.
What chapter are you most proud of? Dramatic pause. I appreciate it.
There was the woman who had an emotional support squirrel that brought the squirrel onto an airplane and then had to be arrested by U.S. Marshals. And the woman couldn't understand why that wasn't allowed.
Was the squirrel on a leash?
It was in a cage.
Okay.
And it's a rodent.
It's a rodent.
And imagine you sit next to someone in coach and you're taxiing.
You can't imagine sitting in coach, Ken.
That's a stretch. And then you look beside you and it's not a dog.
No.
This thing,
not even a cat. And I don't like cats.
And she's feeding it with a baby bottle through the cage.
All right. Yeah.
And this thing's scurrying and squeaking.
That sounds like that animal needs support. Like that animal is not supporting her.
The emotional support animal needs an emotional support animal.
Yes.
Right. So these are the types of people I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
When you live inside your house, like people are thinking they're kings of the castle, queens of the castle, everything's ordered, every food is delivered, and then they get outside into society. It's like they're beasts.
Sounds like my daughter's first semester at college.
Right. You forget what it's like.
She didn't realize they didn't have DoorDash. And she was like, oh my God.
I have to walk outside and interact with people. Maybe the things I'm doing home alone aren't really acceptable in civilized society. And this is what we're facing.
Yes. And again, it boils down to people need therapy. You are going to offer psychiatric rehabilitation centers, which I think is very giving of you.
Yes.
You're going to franchise them.
Yes. That is news to me. But yes, Kennedy, that is something we're exploring.
That's
the Jesse Waters Foundation.
Very lucrative. My dad always said charity starts at home.
That's right. I'm only into charity if I can get something out of it.
Well, that's the American way.
Quote of the day.
That's right. Jesse Waters, get it together. Get your copy now and find your emotional support chapter to the liberal in all of us, Jesse.
And have a liberal.
Have a liberal.
Don't go anywhere. More Kennedy Saves the World right after this.
Welcome to this episode of Kennedy Saves the World. You made it to Friday, and so did we. So I have been trying to get this guest on Happy Hour for quite some time, and I am shaking up a virgin blood orange margarita for none other than Will Cain. He is the co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. He is also the host of the Will Cain podcast and the Will Cain Show, now weekdays at noon Eastern, 9 in the West. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Multimedia, incredibly talented, lives in Texas, commutes to New York to work at Fox, and you have been kind and gracious enough to share a blood orange mocktail margarita with me.
This is beautiful.
To Will Cain and to freedom.
Thanks to freedom.
To freedom.
Absolutely. Here we go. I've got a guitar pick.
That's lovely.
That's very lovely. So, this is a margarita.
Yeah.
And not
a mocktail.
My father-in-law had strong beliefs about what is a margarita.
Okay.
He said, and he made them very simple.
Yeah.
And they were perfect because of their simplicity.
Yes.
You went simple, which is, I don't know what's in here. I'm not just being work safe. I don't know what's in here.
Yeah.
But generally for him, it was tequila and squeeze limes and fruit. And it made it's crazy how understated can be so good. Not loaded up, my point is, with a bunch of sugars and syrups.
No, there's no sugar. There's no syrup. If you were making this with alcohol, my suggestion would be how I like to make a blood orange margarita, not that I did today, would be uh, 2 ounces of Casamigos tequila, maybe half to 3/4 of an ounce of mezcal, and a half an ounce of triple sec. And then a squeeze of lime juice, very healthy squeeze of a full blood orange. And then you shaky, and strain over ice.
It's really good.
Oh,
I
thanks,
really
Will.
like the use of the blood orange.
It makes it so pretty.
And again, Worthy's not virgin.
Mhm.
The introduction of mezcal is really interesting because it gives it that smoky mezcal
Yes.
flavor. Are you a big fan of mezcal?
I like it. I don't like it to be overwhelming. Like, I wouldn't want that to be the driving force in a margarita, but I like it to be a compliment. So that's what I would do were I doing that.
Well, I have very specific liquor tastes that follow the season. So I like tequila. It's my favorite sipping liquor.
Yes. That's why when you make a margarita with tequila, this was an inspiration drawn from your passion for tequila.
I knew you knew that about
Yes.
me. And I knew that this was a tailored drink specifically for me, which made me feel warm and fuzzy.
Of course.
So thank you, Kennedy. Tequila for me is summer, spring, and some of fall.
Okay.
When it gets cold out,
Yep.
winter, I usually move to whiskey. I move to bourbon.
I'm a fan.
But I've tried. My point I'm driving toward is mezcal. I've tried with mezcal to use it as a replacement for tequila to sip, and I like it, but I don't love it.
Yes.
It's just, I think maybe I like my meat smoked, but I don't like my drink smoked. I like bourbon, but I don't love scotch. I
See,
like tequila. I don't love mezcal.
I feel the same way. That's why I wanted a little bit, not, if we were doing that, I would say I would just put a little bit of mezcal in there.
Yeah,
So you could
perfect.
sense it, but not be overwhelmed by it, because anything that is smoky can totally overwhelm you. And then you do have to put too much sweetener in
Sugar.
there. Yeah, you do have to either lengthen it with too much water, or you put too much sugar and it loses the point of the drink, in my opinion. But I agree. I love whiskey. I love bourbon. Scotch is very particular for me. I have to be in a very, very particular mood. You know who loves scotch? Is Chad Pergram.
I've tried. When I went to law school and there was something about that age, which whatever it was, 23, 24, my buddies, I guess in a move to be sophisticated once you go to law school, started drinking scotch. And this was an age when you're starting to set down the keystone and move to a more sophisticated alcohol palate. But I just couldn't. I don't know what it is about scotch. And by the way, for tequila or for bourbon, I usually drink it simple, just over rocks. And I enjoy the flavor, but I just can't. I'm just not man enough to be Chad Pergram.
But there's nothing like a good tequila that you drink with ice and maybe a little bit of lime. When you can sip that, it's lovely. And I feel the same way about whiskey. Like, I don't want to complicate. The only time I complicate whiskey is if I'm gambling, playing blackjack. I will drink Beam and Coke or Jack and Coke.
I like that you don't feel too sophisticated for that. I agree. Every once in a while, Jack and Coke hits just right.
But for some reason in Vegas at a blackjack table where it's, not a high limit and you can stay there for a few hours, like, sipping on Jack and Coke is just fine with me.
Here's my one, and we sound like alcoholics. Here's my one place
during dry January.
I like to get fancy with bourbon. I like old fashions.
Old fashions are great. I love a nice dark Oregon cherry. Why not? Little citrus, little hint of hello.
I also like the name.
Yeah.
I'll have an old fashioned, Gary.
Yes, I'm an old fashioned kind of gal. Therefore, I'll have a ham ready for my man when he comes home from a hard day slaving at the office.
By the way, is there a better bartender name than Gary? Like, order a drink, right? Right. Order a drink right now. Hey, I'll have an old fashioned, Fred. Doesn't land like, I'll have an old fashioned, Gary.
Gary. Yeah. And that's funny you say that, because you have kids. I don't know. Like, this is really interesting because there are two kinds of parents in this world. And I realize that I fit firmly into this camp. There's the parents who let their kids watch SpongeBob, and those who do not, because when my 18-year-old was in kindergarten, a study came out that said SpongeBob basically causes brain damage. And so parents freaked out and they're like, we're not going to let our children watch SpongeBob. But, my baby daddy and I were like, well, we think it's kind of funny, so we're going to let them watch it because it's a lot better than some of the dumb alternative kid shows, which are completely humorless. But now that she's 18, she has friends who have no idea any of the SpongeBob references. Where are you on the SpongeBob parenting spectrum?
Culturally blind. I know nothing about SpongeBob beyond memes.
Mm.
And I don't know that my boys have or do watch SpongeBob. My oldest is 16, and then maybe this is in the same vein. I did have to ask myself, should I let him like go all in on binge watching South Park?
Yes.
And he does. And I think South Park, for the record, is genius. Like when you write or when the Library of Congress puts together American television, South Park has to be mentioned. I don't know, top 5, top 10. It's first of all, it's genius, the piece of work that they churn out on a regular basis tied to the news cycle and then make it timeless and funny. Those guys, I'm not throwing around this word casually, are genius.
Absolutely right. I agree with you completely because the time pressure that they're under, because The Simpsons also has been on the air probably longer than South Park, if memory serves, because Simpsons came on when I was in high school. South Park came on when I was at MTV, so South Park hasn't been on as long. But, The Simpsons is known to be populated. Like, I went and watched a table read, which I love that show, but they were like, we have more PhDs than any other writer's room in the history of television. It's like, well, that's great. And there, some very brilliant references. But I agree with you. Like, the bravery to take on cultural stuff that would get anyone else canceled, and the fact that they do it all essentially at the last minute,
Yes.
and that time crunch forces them to be even funnier. I also like that was a watershed moment in parenting. It's like, do you let your kids watch South Park? And I made the choice to let them when all of this PC stuff
Me too.
and DEI stuff was happening in the schools. And I'm like, there needs to be a counterbalance. And me sitting there talking about the Federalist Papers at home would be quite boring. And I think we'd have a lot of eye glaze. But they essentially get the same thing, which is a healthy dose of humor and skepticism if they watch South Park and watch them chip away at these sacred institutions.
Perfectly said. And that's where I landed. I said, okay, you can watch South Park. And there's so much over the line with South Park, but intentionally so.
Yes.
They're trying to be provocative. They're trying to say things that are offensive. And it's okay to be offended. You just don't want your kid to internalize it as the gospel. But I have to say that there's a couple of things we've barreled forward on at light speed that I don't think we've properly analyzed the long-term implications for. One of them is sports gambling. I think that we probably don't know.
That's very interesting because it's happening so fast.
So fast.
I mean, I feel the same way about college athletes making so much money so quickly.
Yeah.
It's like we went from nothing to the floodgates wide open. But
this is the nature of conservatism,
Yes.
is to say, take slow. Tradition has value by its very existence. It's not a tradition isn't an on its face endorsement of anything that's lasted time. And I don't think we know how it's going to turn out when it comes to gambling. Like, we've put a device, the phone, into every 20-year-old guy's hand and allowed him to gamble on the next drive of a football game. What does that mean for him 10 years down the road? What kind of vice or habit or addiction has he fostered through gambling?
Oh yeah, gambling is one of those things. It is as addictive as heroin and nicotine and any other
Well, they
substance.
all have their various addiction levels.
Yeah, but there's
And
something
even
about.
personally,
But
like-
I really think there's something genetic about it. Like when that switch is flipped, it's very hard to shut it off.
I find addiction so fascinating because it's different for every person. It's obviously genetic. Like, I've had family members, close family members, addicted to alcohol. I'm not addicted to alcohol.
Yeah.
I could give it up easy. It's a social thing.
I don't
for
know that
me.
I could give up chocolate.
Mine's
Like if I had to choose between chocolate and alcohol, I would absolutely give up chocolate or actually give up alcohol. I
Yeah?
could not give up chocolate.
Really?
Yes.
And like, how does that work into your life? Post dinner? Like, when is chocolate calling you physically?
I've had chocolate 3 times today. And I'm not done.
Like, how? Just tell me how you had it.
I've got 3 boxes of truffles stacked on my shelf in my kitchen, and I don't eat a bunch at once. I love really good dark chocolate, and I love like having a little bit like, and then at work we have baskets with like little good bars and crackles and little Hershey Special Dark, and like I unwrap one of those and like I will find ways to work chocolate into everything.
That is so far removed from anything I can identify with. I would never, ever be addicted to chocolate.
The hardest thing I've ever given up for Lent is chocolate by far. I've given up alcohol several times, and it's like the same thing with dry January. Like first 2 weeks, you feel great, and then after that, it's just like, oh, I would love a gluten-free beer right now. But chocolate was, I could not wait for the clock to strike midnight, and then I was face first in Cadbury cream eggs. Like I said, Will, to freedom.
Cheers to freedom.
Go enjoy your Zin. Happy hour. This has been Kennedy Saves the World, along with Will Cain. I'm Kennedy.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.
Oh, go ahead and leave me a review while you're there. I'd love to hear what you have to say. You've been listening to Kennedy Saves the World on the Fox News Podcast Network.